funny thing, but so a lot of the projects were identified basically to fill a box. Not all of these projects are realistic. Not all of these projects would be a basin-wide benefit. They would all be a benefit of some sort, but it really comes down to, is it benefiting the whole basin, or is it benefiting one very isolated area? Because something done in Shandon isn't necessarily going to help San Miguel or Paso. It's, water transcends a lot of things, but it's not necessarily going to go from there to here and be a direct benefit to San Miguel. A lot of things were, I think, originally thought that they were going to be like universal costs to people. And I think some of these things, nobody really put any thought at all into what the cost was. But in the beginning, it was sort of a means to an end to comply. I think in the future, there's going to be new projects that are going to be proposed that are going to be more realistic and more of a benefit, and then those can be added into the GSP as we go forward. That's the whole point of the evaluation at the 5-year mark, is to see whether it's working or not. If it's not working, or you can't do those things, to come up with something else. When they approved our GSP, there was a couple things that they wanted to get more information on that we didn't provide. I'm still at a loss as to how we didn't provide it, because it's available. But the interaction between the surface and the groundwater, we have that information. I don't know why they didn't put that together. But projects that can bring those two together, that we can utilize the surface water more, would be a more of a benefit regionally than the isolated things that, dumping water into the where. I mean, to me, that's a lot of money for nothing.
Right.
But it would help probably that isolated area. So as far as, the minimum amount we need to do, assuming that the basin isn't in, free fall, which it's not right now. This is my opinion, I'm not a hydrologist, but our basic minimum right now is to do the annual reports, gathering that data, incorporating the new monitoring data into that data to get the best picture that we can get, the most truthful picture that we can get. Doing the evaluations for the GSP, and if we encounter instances of crossing the minimum threshold in certain areas, is coming up with a plan to fix it. We're only doing 2 of those things right now, but if we were to go off on our own, we would still be responsible for an annual report. We would still be responsible for an evaluation. We would still be responsible to the other GSAs around us to make sure that what we're doing is not impacting what they're doing. So there's a huge stack of cards, and any one of them could make the whole thing fall apart. But it takes a lot of cooperation and a lot of patience to get it to build in the first place. But I think at this point, the board, or this board, really needs to look at the big picture things, like what would we want to limit the scope to? Is it only things that are listed in the GSP, or is it any proposed project? Is it are we going to stay as 5 separate GSAs, or do we want to consolidate so that we're all one GSA working in unison? And how is this all being paid for? If this is formed into a JPA, if that's how it goes, are we all paying something? Are de minimis users exempt? Which would mean that 99% of the properties in San Miguel would be exempt. So those are the kinds of things that we need to figure out. As Christina mentioned, there's not a lot of desire to talk about this. Everybody understands that we need to do this, but I guarantee that 3 out of the 5 GSAs don't want to talk about it at all. In a staff level, as far as my meetings are concerned, us and Paso are really the ones that are really trying to make this work, trying to come up with a solution to go forward and make things the best that they could be for the most reasonable effort. But
so then it goes to motive and intent.
yeah, and that goes back to our conversation earlier
Right.
about what's it for, who's benefiting, and who's paying. Because it's been made pretty clear that other GSAs are trying to get the PUCC to pony up money for stuff that would benefit them. So it's, and maybe the end result is that this GSA separates from the other 5 or other 4, and we go at it alone. It's not impossible. It would be difficult, but it's not impossible. And maybe that's the way to protect San Miguel's interest. It's possible, though, that we get down this road and nobody can agree on anything, and us and Paso both want to get out. Maybe us and Paso go together and try to get, work something out so that we can cost share, because we're going to have essentially like interests. Paso has more ag than we do. They have a lot more, they have surface water that they can actually use that they should be using. But, there's a pretty wide gap between us and ag. Not to disparage ag, but we're not the same.
Right.
And that's where all the water's, or the large majority of the water.
85–90% of the water.
So we're like insignificant percent.
Like I mentioned, if we're all one basin and they're charging everybody but de minimis users 99% of San Miguel, if you said everybody in San Miguel had a well, we would all be de minimis users except for 1% maybe. It's probably not even 1%, it's probably like a 0.01%. So, but, for the purposes of this, I think that the best thing to do right at this point would be to agendize it for either the August or September meeting so that we can continue the conversation. But, any input from you guys as far as what you feel would be the best or anything to look at or the best way to move forward, that all needs to be put together so that Christina and I can both push for the district and get things to a point where they're able to be brought out in the public. Part of what I said before about things weren't ready to come out for public consumption is you can't bring 4,000 ideas to the public because they won't know what all 4,000 ideas are. But if you narrow that down to 4 or 10, then that's something that the public can understand, or they at least have time to investigate. But I think there's a misconception that the staff is running amok, but we're not really running amok. It's no different than me talking to Tamara and working something out before we bring it to you guys.
Well, who is the staff? So I hear Mr. Reilly say, well, I've talked to staff.
So
who is that?
This district's staff is myself and Josh Reynolds from WSC.
So each
GSA has their own staff. So county staff is Blaine Reilly and Taylor Blakesley, or the Hallmark Group, however you want to look at that. Paso staff is Chris Lakehill and Kirk Gonzalez, I believe. But as far as EPC, Shannon San Juan, I don't know who their staff are. I know, so if I saw them, I would know them, but I don't.
So this GSA staff, do you guys ever meet as a group? Or?
Yes. So we meet as a group to discuss things before they come to this board or the PVCC board.
So
you mean a group other than you and Josh, or with other people? Is that what you're saying?
We meet as staff. So me and Josh and I meet. we meet on a regular basis for the district business. The staff, like the PBCC staff, myself or Josh or Blaine or whoever, meet as necessary to make sure that we all know what's going on, or that we can discuss whatever is going to be presented before it comes out.
So we got 7.6 million in grants. I think the last meeting they said like 6 point something million of that has already been encumbered. So, and it's all got to be spent by April 1st, 25.
Right.
And this thing kind of comes to an end.
So that, that's a good point, is if at, April 1st, when that's all done, Paso will be done with theirs, we'll be done with ours. I would seriously hope that most of those other projects would be done. But, that's kind of the glue that's holding everything together right now. But it really doesn't have to be, because that grant was awarded to the county.
Right.
So whether we're part of this or not, we have an agreement with the county, who has an agreement with the state. The PDCC wasn't involved in that.
But when the money's gone,
Well, when the money's gone from that, then we'll be back to what we were doing before, which is the annual report, and that's about it. But the concept, at least, on its face, would be to have some sort of successor agency that would be able to carry this forward and take care of routine things and be an agency that if we're going to charge people for anything, that agency would charge people. It wouldn't be the county charging people or Paso or us, it would be that agency. And then that agency would have gone through the Prop 26 or Prop 218 process to establish rates to be charged for the various different things that they would need to charge for regular irrigation, or I don't know if they would break it down by crop type. That doesn't seem logical, but they would have to go through that process and prove that their rates are effective and are covering what they need to cover. But part of that is determining which projects are going forward, which ones aren't, and which classes would be paying that.
right? So, I don't know, the purpose of this is to mitigate the use of the groundwater, right? So Gray comes in here and he says, they've got all this nice amounts of water that they're not using. If they use that, they would pump less groundwater. I mean, there's so many common sense things that aren't being done, additional storage. The state passed the freaking bond, was it 2014? I don't know how many hundreds of billions. Zero. So, it's insane what's going on around here. I mean, nothing's being done. And then do we have an issue? We're talking about our wells. Every meeting we get a report when our water level is on our wells. I think I asked you last time, do we have a history on that? Where are they? Where have they moved over the past 5-10 years?
Yeah.
Is it an issue for us? And how many wells in our district have gone dry? Is that an issue for us? It's an issue for some places, but is it an issue for us?
So,
because we're getting our water from the Salinas River primarily, right?
well, we have groundwater, but it percolates from the Salinas River, which is historically a year-round underground river.
Exactly.
So, the district itself, in our district wells, cycle through basically the same levels year after year. Some years they're a couple feet lower, some years they're a couple feet higher, but we have essentially the same cycle year in and year out. And it's very consistent. If you look back, 40 years or 20 years, they were probably higher, and now they're coming down. But depending on who you ask, we're in, a hundreds of year drought, so we could actually be on the upswing of this hundreds of year drought. Again, not a hydrologist, but my impression of this basin really is that we're, and I'm just continue to describe it this way, we're the hot tub attached to the pool. The water gets washed over into the hot tub and stays there. We're not using enough to actually make a huge difference to that. But Paso and Crescent area, they're sucking more water down and creating depression outside of our hot tub. So our wells have been historically very stable, in relative terms. But am I aware of any wells in our district that have gone dry? No. Am I aware of any wells outside the immediate area of our district that have gone dry? No. Where I live, there's people several blocks away from me that are on wells that are much deeper than mine personally, but they've all gone dry. So, the difference between here and that wall over there might be 10 feet of water level. It's really hard to determine that kind of thing. But us as a district, we're in a much better position than pretty much all of the other GSAs. So
we need to protect our position, really.
Yeah.
So, like our project, the project being funded by Sigma for a recycled water line would really directly affect us because it's reducing groundwater pumping from an ag well that's in our direct basin, or our part of the basin.
So I just wanted to ask, you were saying that, going back to losing my train of thought here, there's so much, but how is it that they're going to be able to, you mentioned about, agriculture. If they're pumping, if, the farmer is pumping and then they would have this fee structure. You're talking about that, the 218 process and everything like that. Off of what? Right now, there is, you're saying monitoring wells. You're saying that they would have to be, right?
So in order to assess somebody, you would have to have some mechanism to understand how much they're using.
Yes.
Well, they did that. We fired that satellite.
So
that's supposedly one way.
Yeah. So what they want to do is they want to use ET, which is evapotranspiration, and measure that. But that only tells you what's coming off of the crop.
Right.
It doesn't tell you how much they put onto it in the first place.
Okay.
So there is a correlation between how much you put onto it and how much comes off of it. But, I'm sure we can all agree that if you have more canopy, then more water is going to stay in the ground than if you had smaller canopy. But, larger canopy also has a little bit more ET coming off those leaves because it's more exposed to the sun, but more water can stay in the ground. So it's really what kind of information you want and how accurate you want to be. If you want to be accurate, then you meter every well, and you get in a program that you test those meters on a 2, 5, whatever year frequency to ensure that they're accurate.
But the problem is, like what you were saying, is that well over there is one thing, and then this well over here, but just because the geology could be, totally different, so you can't even use wells in a geographical region, it's not going to be super accurate. And anyway, we're kind of off topic, but anyway, that's just what I'm kind of, my concern is that, there's going to be a lot of unhappy people to have.
And I think that's why there's a huge push for ET, is that it's accurate for what it is, but it's not accurate for what's coming out of the ground.
Yeah.
My favorite is the people that use water they don't even need to use just to maintain their water rights.
Right, yeah.
Oh, let me just tell you, and myself, I'm getting to that. So I have 40 acres of grapes, and these grapes were planted in 1986. They're getting very, very old, and I am seriously having to look at, some of my plants are dying, but I have to continue to water them. It is ridiculous And I did speak to, I think I spoke to you, Director, when you first got on the board. Yeah, and saying, talk about low-hanging fruit. My gosh, that is the lowest, is, I should be able to maintain those water rights and not have to turn on my irrigation at all. And 20 years down the road, I still maintain those if I, want to, again, start using it. So that's where we start. That would help tremendous.
And we actually, well, not we, but the county actually tried to fix that problem, and then it got overturned and thrown in the trash.
It's contemplated in the C.S.D. The Miller program is partially one of the reasons that this fee study was started by the counties, because they wanted to know how they can implement the Miller program. And one of the ideas for the Miller program is allowing people to stop using and pumping water that they're not using, but maintain their water rights for a period of time. But that requires a certain level of administration and review that costs money. And so the question is, how do you fund the Miller program? How do you fund these sustainability programs? Because that is a regional problem. Again, like you said, most of you don't have the large pumpers that are dealing with this in San Miguel, but it is a large problem in the rest of the basin, where people are pumping and dumping to maintain their water rights because there isn't a mechanism in place.
Okay,
and because that mechanism costs money.
But there doesn't need to be a mechanism. You just have a California, we already have a California right to irrigate and use water on our land to farm. Just leave us alone and let us. And it should not. That's the problem. It should not be for a period of years. It should be forever.
Well, that's what some people at least want to fix. It doesn't seem to be a universal concept that's widely accepted for some reason. But there's plenty of people in the same boat that don't want to pump.
Yeah.
And they'll come and tell you until they blue in the face that they don't want to pump, but they can't afford to lose their water rights. We had that here in San Miguel.
Yes, I
on
remember.
River Road.
Yeah, I remember. Yes.
The county was telling him, no, you can't plant anything because you haven't been pumping. Mm-hmm. Well, just because they weren't watching him pump water doesn't mean he didn't pump water. Just because they weren't paying attention and seeing what he had planted there or what he was pumping, they just assumed that he didn't.
Right.
But everybody should be able to say, look, this is my property. I don't want to pump right now, but I might want to pump next year, or I might want to pump in 10 years.
And I don't even know if I can change the location of where I can pump. That's how tight it is. I have to look at that, or to change the different crop, to do a different, so anyway, it's a mess.
And that's part of
total control. That's
part of the problem with allowing one agency to control that. Mm-hmm. Right now, the county controls that.
Okay.
If, for instance, that there was a JPA that was formed and they became the controlling entity, then you might have something that's more reasonably applied. But the county would have to give up that. And the county, like I said, they had an ordinance in place to allow people to furlough, or not furlough, but then they reversed course and threw it in the trash. So there's a lot of problems here, and they're not all going to be solved by, they're not going to be solved by us, but they're not going to be solved by a JPA, they're not going to be solved by a lot of things. But if we don't bring them up, we don't talk about them, then they just keep going.
Right.
Before you guys move on, just what Christina was saying, that chapter 8 or section 8 and 9, it's on our website under the groundwater, under the fine cable, we want to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Kelly, can you come up with a list of things, and you were listed them down, the cost, you were going through it there. I know it's going to be in our minutes. Can you submit a list to us of the things you think ought to be considered?
Yeah.
So that we consider it the next time that we meet.
Yeah, we can do that.
All right, if nothing else from the board. We'll go ahead and adjourn or reconvene.
Just down to board comment, I want to.
So we can reconvene to
We'll have to
the regular board.
I have to reconvene to that.
Okay.
Hold on.
All right.
Just wait for me to go ahead with that. This time we reconvene to the San Miguel Community Services District Board of Directors.
Time?
8:38.
This section is intended for an opportunity for board members to make brief announcements, request information from staff, request future agenda items, and/or report on their own activities related to the director's business. No action is to be taken until it's placed on a future agenda. Renette, you have something? Okay. I have nothing. Everything? Owen?
Yes, I would like to, I'd like, next month's meeting, I would like to have Mr. Graywald and Mr. Powell put on a 20-minute presentation concerning this groundwater, the GSA, because they're loaded with information, you know.
Presentation?
Yeah, presentation, yeah.
So the request is to have a presentation from Mr. Graywall and Mr. Powell regarding
Right.
the status of the basin or the overall picture of water as was described by Mr. Graywall earlier.
Yeah, right. Pretty much that, and then also the basin and
20-minute?
yeah. That ought to be enough, right? 20?
Or we could go on for hours.
I know, like, it could go on for hours.
Do we have another director that would like to have that?
For that?
So the question is, are we going to have a big, heavy schedule
Yes.
for
Always.
this? So is September maybe a better month? Or is that heavy too?
I know that August is going to be busy already. If you want to put it in September, we can keep that one later so we can have more time.
We should have done it at this meeting. This would have
Can I
been-
make a comment? The next PVCC meeting is September what? What is that?
Well, it would be the day before our meeting.
It's just before
Yeah.
your meeting in
I don't know what
September,
it is.
correct?
Yeah.
So that might be a good time to do it, because we might have more feedback
Yeah.
from that meeting.
So it'd be September
I thought it
26th.
was 20-something.
And your guys, the PBC is 25th.
Okay, September, we good.
So is that okay?
Like
You want to
I
be the
said,
second
I mean,
on that?
25th.
they're loaded with information.
Oh, I know.
You know, and why try to get that information in a 3-minute thing?
September,
September
Davis,
works for me.
second by Gregory.
Yeah.
Be part of the regular.
Hey, before you adjourn, I got
Part of
some.
the GSA.
All right.
I know I'm not a board member, I still got some.
Clarify that.
Right? Anybody else? Okay,
Go ahead.
No,
I'm standing for this one.
do you guys need 20 minutes each, or?
Uh-oh, I'm standing. Okay, San Miguel was founded by the Spanish on July 25th, 1797, when the mission of San Miguel Archangel was established by Father Furman and was completed in 1818. The site of the mission was specifically chosen due to its proximity to large number of Salinan villages in the area and to close the gap between Mission San Antonio and Mission San Luis Obispo. From this, the mission grew our community. In 1803, it was reported the population of San Miguel was 908. While its lands grazed 809 cattle, 3,223 sheep, and 342 horses, and 29 mules. Today marks the 227th anniversary of the founding of San Miguel, which has grown to a population of 2,756. I don't know how many mules or cattle. And since its lands on the special board meeting tonight, staff has brought cookies as a token of honoring our town's history, and please enjoy it. You can adjourn now.
Okay, I'm going to adjourn the
No
in the
cookies
next
till we
regular
adjourn.
meeting.
Time?
8:43.
Michelle, did you